Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Adnan NAWAZ.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed your task forces. By now, you'll probably have realized that I like a good story, and usually they're about football. So what we're talking about over the next 20 minutes is specifically about a sponsorship deal between General Motors and a project called One World Football. Just before we begin that chat with our two guests here, so the story I have for you is about the power of football and how it can bring people together. This will be about social projects, but in terms of football bringing people together, I met a professor from the Netherlands. It was probably about 10 years ago that I met him. He said 30 years before that, he had been in the middle of Africa somewhere. He couldn't for the life of him remember where it was, but it wasn't in a city. It was a rural part of Africa somewhere. He didn't speak the local language, so he was finding it quite difficult to communicate with people. Suddenly, they found out he was from Holland, and a guy said to him, "Ah, Holland, Cruyff, Cruyff, Cruyff." And then their relationship really began to improve. Johan Cruyff did that for them. So what is One World Football? Well, it's about a ball that these two gentlemen are holding, and more than 1 million of them have been given to communities in more than 160 countries around the world. So it's about the ball and about encouraging people to have fun, to play, social inclusion, the kind of stuff that we've already been talking about. And before we hear from these two, just a short video about the One World Football project for you.
Would you trade?
One World Football. So we have Stephen Sonderman here, who's Asia Director for One World Football in Thailand. And with him is Iskandar, SHAHRIL, Mohammed Rawi, your regional manager, brand promotion for football at General Motors. So we obviously have to start with the ball before you even tell us about how the project works. So you're both holding one, but Stephen, let me ask you just to demonstrate to everybody here what this ball is all about.
Okay, just as Adnan said, the mission, we're a social mission as One World Football Project is, and the ball is a representation of how we can encourage more play throughout the world. So if you want to describe One World Football, it's the word play, or it's, as we saw in the video, it's encouraging more play throughout the world. So the ball itself is magic, but, and you'll see in a second when I demonstrate how it works, but the magic of the ball is really in what it brings out in the children that get the ball, that use the ball. I've run organizations in Southeast Asia where we used football as for sport for development. With my organization, we were concentrating on landmine issues and teaching children how to avoid landmines with the use of football. And we had to buy 10,000 balls a year, which was incredibly expensive for a small organization. And the balls would last approximately 7 to 10 days. We didn't have this ball until about the very end of the time when I was working with the project over 6 years. And to have a ball which can last, I mean, the balls that we put into play right now for the past 4 to 6 years, they're still out there, they're still playing. Compared to the balls that we were using before, this is amazing for a child in Cambodia or in Central Africa. But to give you a little bit of the technology of the ball, the material is basically similar to that of Crocs footwear. And if you step on Crocs, they pop back to shape. It's called a memory foam. And the density is a lot different than Crocs, so it's not going to feel the same way. But it's got air inside it. Everybody asks, how is this possible that the ball stays open? Because I can take a knife and stab the ball, I can cut one of these hexes out, a hole in the ball, and it'll still fly true. But the real key to showing it is you just squish the ball, and it's back to new. It doesn't do that with a kick. It really takes some pressure with a knee. I'm going to pass one around so you guys can actually. Anybody ready to catch it?
Go on, Iskandar, give the other one out as well. Obviously, everybody, when you see a ball, you want to touch it, right? You want to play with it.
Nice catch.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible. Whose idea was this, Stephen, and where did the funding come from? Because you've talked about the price of making footballs.
It's a fantastic story. So basically the founder and inventor, Tim Yonigan, who is also, he's a musician and composer, was watching a program on children in Darfur that are playing on a pitch, very hard, what we would not call a pitch. I mean, barbed wire fences surrounding it, nails, horrible surface. They're in bare feet, and the things that amazed him was they had made their own ball out of the scraps of trash that they found on the pitch. It was actually a quite beautiful ball, stitched with a hex around the outside of it, and he was amazed at the passion that they had for creating this ball, because they wanted to play football, they wanted to play sport, and so they had to create a ball because they didn't have one. But he's also amazed that the human being has not created a ball that would be indestructible, or nearly indestructible, as the case of this ball is. So he kind of started jotting down notes. He's like, we should come up with a ball. We should be able to create something for the human race that can encourage play. The kids in Darfur don't have to make their own ball. They have to find a pitch, which is hard, but at least they can have a ball. And he was having a meeting with a friend of his, Sting, and
The Sting,
The
we're
Sting,
talking about, from the Police.
The Sting,
yeah?
yes,
Yeah.
from the Police, one of my favorite bands. And Sting was across the table, and he's a huge football fan. And Tim did not tell him about this story because he thought Sting would buy in, want to be a part of it, but he was just telling him because he's a football fan. And Sting was amazed by the experience. And then he said, well, why don't you just do it? And I'll fund the development of the ball. So, long story short, Sting was the funder behind creating the ball. And once the ball was created, it took a lot of iterations, a lot of prototypes that were made over the course of 3-4 years. A lot of elbow grease put into it. And then it came up with the ball, and we introduced it at the World Cup in South Africa. And it's a concept that's hard to wrap your head around. A ball that you can stab, and it'll still fly true. But the beauty of it was that basically Chevrolet found the ball and said, "Wow, this is a really they've seen that they really want to be part of this world football experience, and they saw this ball as durable." And it goes right in line with Chevy's tagline for finding new roads and encouraging play. So Chevrolet was very bold in taking the step to actually approach One World Football.
Okay, well, you set up the next part of this chat very well, because Iskandar, General Motors, what would they have seen in this? And what comes to mind is what George Foreman said yesterday about Muhammad Ali. When you're on a mission, you don't get knocked out. And there's something about this which resonates as a mission. Tell us about General Motors and the relationship now with One World Football.
Sure. So at the core of the brand, it's all about possibilities for us. And this is where we try to connect play. With play, basically everything is possible. And what that means is it can become a reality. Yeah? And so far with this, us as a founding sponsor, we've been in the relationship for about 2.5 years now.
Yes.
We've distributed more than 1 million balls, and what that means is we have actually enabled children, particularly children, to play. Yeah, and with play, everything becomes possible. I mean, some of the discussions that you had yesterday, against racism, against minorities, I think all that can be solved when you have 22 kids out there playing football, not knowing the language, but everything gets done.
This is so different and opposite to the big deal that General Motors has just signed with Manchester United, the mega $560 million over 7 seasons for having the Chevrolet logo on the Manchester United shirt.
Yep.
So what's in it for General Motors? Is it just to make a massive company look good? Is it just a marketing exercise that they can say, look at us, we do actually care?
Well, beyond marketing, I think it's about the emotional connection, the actual human connection that we want to have, either with fans, with Manchester United fans, with Chevy owners, as well as, let's say the less fortunate in general. So the brand has got 2 football assets, Manchester United, to promote the brand, and another one is One World Football project, basically where we get to the grassroots level. So in other words, it complements, it does integrate, from up there. Sometimes you talk about, the English Premier League and such, and then what's important is there's longevity at the grassroots level, because with a ball such as this, the fact that you do not need to pump the ball, what that means is, yes, you have to produce the ball once, and then there's, it can be sustained 3 years, 4 years, unlike, let's say, the usual leather football that, being played on a rough terrain in harsh environments wouldn't last you more than 7 days, 10 days max.
Stephen, in Thailand in particular, where you are, what do you see on the ground? What feedback do you get when you give the ball out and maybe follow it up a few months later? What do you see?
Obviously, it's positive in general. Actually 100% positive. The thing that I've seen recently in Thailand is that Chevrolet has done quite well with is they have encouraged their local dealers to be part of this program, and so the dealers who are generally pretty distant from the hub, for instance, in Singapore, as far as communications, are now they've got an asset that they are using in their local communities that is not a one-off thing. They bring the balls in, they help building pitches and so forth in schools, and it's just not just the balls. They're actually doing some infrastructure work as well. And so then it's something where they come back in 6 months and they get to know the school, so the dealers are actually involved in the local. And that's what I think the beauty of the whole relationship was supposed to be, is to down on the dealer level to kind of work in.
I'll just add, if you don't mind. So we use basically this One World Football project as part of the dealer engagement exercise. It's not just about selling cars. It's about the dealers actually getting to know the people in the community, getting kids to play, being involved in schools. We know, for example, this 1 million balls that we distribute, more than half actually in Africa. I mean, I think in all honesty, you're probably not going to sell the cars to these people in the next 5-10 years, but that's not the point. The point is it's about how the company can give back to the community. And we think that, fortunately, this product solution is solid enough for it to have that sustainability.
So from what you're seeing on the ground to completely the other side of the whole project is that we were talking backstage about Thailand currently being under military rule. They have said that they've got their timetable to go back to democracy,
yes.
But how does it work, a big sponsorship deal like this between a multinational and a project like One World Football, in terms of having to get around any red tape that governments might put in place? Whether they're military or not, that's really not the point.
Right.
It's about working around, through, with governments. How does that work?
Well, it's a very good question, and that's where actually I come in. We have a landmark MOU with the Asian Football Confederation.
Memorandum of Understanding?
Yes,
Yep.
sorry, Memorandum of Understanding, acronyms. And also with the AFC, the Asian Football, AFDP, so Prince Ali's organization, and then also the AFC, Asian Football Confederation. And for instance, this is Asia focused because I work in Asia. Say we want to reach out to Tajikistan. I will actually contact the AFC in Kuala Lumpur and ask for an introduction with the Football Association. And the Football Association is always a good starting point. Generally, in most countries, it's a good starting point because the Football Association oftentimes has a relationship with the Ministry of Education, or they will have a relationship for a tax exemption to get the balls into the country without having to pay for the balls being coming in. And that's a really big part of the whole thing, is that a small NGO in a country, say India, cannot afford to pay for the tax to bring the balls in. So that's where a partner like the All India Football Federation or the sports authority in the country comes in, and that's where I come in and I'm talking with them, and they work it out, and they actually bring the balls in and they hand them off to the NGOs. But it's not just like that. It's not a one-off. We don't just hand the balls off. They have to provide a very intricate distribution plan. It's down to the letter on gender and age, because we do size 4 balls and size 5 balls, so kids under 12 are going to use a size 4 ball. Kids above are going to need a size 5. And then there's a follow-up a month later, follow-up 3 months later, follow-up 6 months later for monitoring and evaluation.
Iskandar, you're responsible for such a large part of the globe in terms of your job for General Motors. What is it, Asia, Pacific, and also Middle East, North Africa?
Yeah, and Africa, yeah.
Out of all of these places, which countries have touched you most in terms of the One World Football project that you've seen with your own eyes?
Exactly. Africa, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that, we're able to deliver the balls, to communities where, let's say, less fortunate. But just to see the kids, playing, to see the smiles on their faces, I think that brings joy already.
And what's the process of actually getting the ball to them? What, you send it in a box and say, go and play with it, or you have a representative who comes and...
They come by the container.
Right.
So, I mean, the balls themselves, as you can see, they don't compress, so we ship a lot of air. And they come by about 5,000 to a container, and so we can do half containers. So what we end up doing is we get the distribution plan, it gets approved, we make sure that the customs is all cleared, and then we ship the balls they're made in Taiwan, and they go. So for Asia, it's actually a short shipping time, but if you're going to Bolivia, it's a long way to go.
In this partnership, One World Football is actually the conduit for Chevrolet to get in touch with each of the NGOs in the local markets.
Yep.
So in other words, we're actually open to NGOs who are present today on the floor to may actually want to connect with us, so that we can have these balls distributed to them.
I had quite a complicated question, but we haven't got time for it, so I'll leave it for the larger panel. It's about control and sponsorship and NGOs like yours, and I think your relationship between GM and One World Football isn't particularly relevant to that kind of particular problem, because you seem to have got a great relationship. So let me just end by asking you about future projects that you're thinking about for One World Football.
Well, firstly, I'd have to say that we're not an NGO, and that's I think that's important to note. We're actually a B corporation, so we have a triple bottom line where it's profit is important for us, it's sustainable profit, but also environmental and social. And I'm not sure if the audience knows much about B corporations, but they're gaining momentum around the globe. Europe is many more B corporations. It's a social venture in the right direction. So with that in mind, I mean, we operate similarly to an NGO, because you would look at me and say, an NGO, but we're not. We are actually a corporation. But as far as future projects, obviously Chevrolet is an amazing partner for us. So we would like to continue the project with Chevrolet. We also, on the other side of that, is we have a buy one, give one ball. And this is what we've been doing for a long time, similar to the Tom's Shoes model, where you buy a ball online, and then you choose where that ball is going to go, to what organization. The second ball is going to go to an organization.
Okay, guys, Iskandar and Stephen, thank you very much indeed. So that's GM's sponsorship relationship with One World Football. Thanks very much, guys.